We continue with our conversation here at the Transnet podcast series happening on the sidelines of the mining Indaba for 2025. As you can tell, the hive of activity continues here at the Transnet stand, where we're inside the Expo Center, coupled with many other peers from across the continent, with the opportunity to showcase the important role that Transnet serves in South Africa's economy. A key enabler when it comes to the environment of logistics, the movement of goods and services, and so critical to the survival and the success of the mining industry. Well, as you can tell, many participants joining us, and that's added to the energy that's here. But more than that, we also want to make sure that we have a full, clearer, and better understanding of these structural shifts and changes that have taken place at Transnet that are translating into strategy that yields operational outcomes that literally make it a bigger and better company for the country. And someone who is at the forefront of that certainly has to be the Chief of Strategy and Planning, Dr. Andrew Shaw, who joins us now to tell us a lot more detail around the intricacies of this particular strategy, but more so how it really has translated into great value and operational shifts for the organization. Dr. Shaw, such a pleasure to have you with us.
Nice to be here, Gubish.
It's exciting to be here and yet again in another year. And maybe let's start there. The mining Indaba is nothing new to you here. Last year, you spoke on a panel and on the stage, giving us a refreshing perspective of the shift in the strategy for Transnet. Has our story changed at all? Has there been progress since the last time we gathered here?
As we were discussing a little offline, the pressures, I think, are more intense on us, especially from government as our shareholder and financial. But to a large extent, the strategy still remains intact. We still have a Reinvent for growth strategy. Our focus is to drive volume, to draw in the private sector, and then it's also to achieve the policy objective, which is to transform your organization. So, we're still very much on board with that.
So very much on board with that. And maybe let's just deeper into the Reinvent for growth strategy. Just exactly, what it consists of, and most importantly, why this remains crucial for Transnet's survive.
Okay, so the Reinvention and growth strategy has really got two key pillars. The first is around recovery. So that's trying to sustain the existing volumes, reduce the decline or address the decline and start to lift the volumes, particularly in rail. But the same is true also in respect of ports and pipelines, where we've set targets that are higher than in the previous year. We have performance targets around the performance of equipment, assets, cranes, in the ports, locomotives and wagons in the rail environment. That recovery part still remains a core part of the strategy. The second part of the strategy is the transformational element. So the transformational element really deals with policy reforms. So that's around creating a Transnet that will allow third-party operators on the rail side. It's around transforming further the ports component, which was already addressed in the previous round of government policy. But it's also around drawing the private sector in. And how do we do that in a structured way, which meets the needs of the economy, but also benefits Transnet?
Got you. And many might sit back and think, okay, well, we've heard this narrative, but there isn't a full appreciation and understanding of how the involvement of the private sector really does reshape the future of Transnet and the logistics environment in South Africa. Add a few more layers of detail as to why this remains imperative.
Okay, so the private sector participation initiatives have been there, but our drive is to prioritize certain key transactions and to use that as a way to lift and empower the South African economy. So the instruction to us from the minister is I would like to see in 5 years 250 million tons moving on the network. Transnet does not have the capital nor the operational resources to go up to that level. So what do we need to do? We need to do probably a few things. We need to sustain the recovery strategy, so target what we can as our volume of that. So we'd like to drive that up probably between 175 and 180 million tons. I think that's still a discussion with TFR. We would like to empower the private sector to come in on the available slots on the network, operate additional trains. There seems to be a lot of excitement around that, but we're yet to see these trains, right? We would like to see them. So a number of companies, big South African corporates have said, yes, we'd like to invest and start this process. But in a sense, I see them holding back and saying, show us the network. We've gone out with a network statement. I think the infrastructure manager has done extremely well in terms of taking the network statement out. I believe there's going to be a slight annex to it in the next month or so, and that will provide faster access for third-party operators. But then the core of the PSP initiatives is actually around creating partnerships with the private sector in certain key parts of the Transnet business. So we think, okay, well, we dominate this business, but with somebody else, we can crowd in their investment, we can crowd in their know-how, and we can expand certain parts of Transnet to deliver against this mandate that we've been giving.
And maybe let's talk about that mandate. Some might say that the targets in terms of tonnage might be very ambitious. How ambitious are they, or is it easy to acquire and get to these levels of measurement that we're trying to adhere to? In other words, are we biting off more than we can chew, or is this part of the process of capacitating Transnet in order to meet these objectives, Faber?
Good question, actually. I guess it is a really difficult target. When you're at 175 or thereabouts, we're not quite there. To reach 250 seems like an ambitious target. But remembering that Transnet delivered 225 in 2017-18, and the University of Stellenbosch has identified that there's more than 300 million tons of traffic available to Transnet to move if we were able to operate at best practice. So the volume is there. It's really just about connecting the dots, putting in place our ability to move, and then adding a private sector component to that. So that's really what we're about at the moment, is trying to design that in such a way that we can commit to delivering those volumes. But at the end of the day, we do lose a certain degree of control over who delivers the volumes, because if the private sector is partly in the driving seat, then they will have that responsibility on themselves.
Got you. As you've mentioned, collaboration is very key and critical. We are seeing implementation of the strategy that actually started off from a base of structural reforms and now translating into operational outcomes. But take us back to another theme that you mentioned, which is the PSPs. And maybe you can give us a lot more detail as to which of these have been prioritized, some intricate detail maybe in terms of the operational outcomes that have been attained so far.
Okay, so government is pushing for quite a wide range of PSPs, and they're contained in the Freight Logistics Roadmap, which was published by the presidency and now is being implemented by Department of Transport. So we have our work cut out for us. We have a guidebook in terms of what we have been requested to do. That document has been as far as cabinets. So there's a lot of pressure for us to fulfill those outcomes. So within that, we have to determine, okay, which of these PSPs are low-hanging fruit, which are relatively easy to deliver, and which ones have the biggest impact the fastest. So we've identified 5 for this forthcoming financial year. So that would be 25-26. On that list is the conclusion of the DCT2 transaction. So that's the equity partner for a concession of the DCT2 terminal with TPT. That has unfortunately hit a legal logjam. So we continue very hard on the sites to see if we can close that out. That's outside of my responsibility, but it's now in legal hands. I think the ability of that transaction to deliver financially a big chunk of funds back to Transnet to help us with our sustainability, and also improve the ability of DCT2 to deliver against the performance standards, is really what we really would like to get in place as quickly as possible. The second one is the LeaseCo transaction, which is about setting up a rail rolling stock leasing company. Yolisa, who's one of my co-executives, has been driving this very ably. That's due to go out to market at the end of March. So they've been working very hard in terms of driving that transaction forward. We would like to allocate more than 600 locomotives into the transaction and a couple of thousand wagons in various states of repair or disrepair, with the intention of improving the quality of that by rehabilitating that rolling stock. We know this can be done because Transnet Engineering has been doing it already, and the private sector has previously picked up some of our older locomotives and transformed them into usable equipment, and they use them right across the continent. So there's a huge opportunity there. It will take probably 5 to 6 years to run through all those assets and repair them and take them back to the market, but it has 2 big benefits. The one is that financially, it brings benefits to Transnet Freight Rail because they get the benefit of selling that equipment into the LeaseCo. And the second benefit is that this LeaseCo would be a mixed equity company where the private sector would probably take a majority, but where Transnet also benefits through taking this rolling stock and then leasing it back to the private sector. So that's number 2. So if I can go through each, if that's okay. The next one probably on our list is the Richards Bay Dry Bulk Terminal, which has been operated by TPT for years. They have a license to do so, but it's a fairly antiquated terminal. It's operated using ship's gear. There's no automation. That's very manual. It has served the magnetite and ferrochrome market as well as some of the other bulk products coming out of Mpumalanga, Limpopo. Some of those products going into Maputo. But we would like to transform that particular terminal into a fully automated terminal, double the volume going through the terminal, and we need a partner to co-invest. We know for the material, for the commodities moving through that terminal, there's massive global demand, right? So the opportunity for that terminal to deliver that is there. We just have to set it in motion. So again, we're very hopeful we can get that transaction, an RFP for that transaction out into the markets this coming year. The next one that I should mention is the manganese corridor. So our focus there has initially been just the terminal at Coega, right? So we have to build a new export terminal at Coega to export manganese. The intention was always to increase the capacity significantly from the existing Port of PE terminal, which is in Gqeberha. We have an agreement that with the province and the local authority that we would exit that port because these dirty products are creating a lot of unhappiness, and they are creating a situation where the local authority is not able to reinvest in that prime land at the port. So that has been a long-standing acknowledgement. What we've recently added into that is a rail dimension because we don't have the capital to uplift the volume that is necessary on that line. We would like to take it up to somewhere between 12 and 16 million tons of additional traffic. And we need that traffic to serve the new NMET terminal at Coega. So we've put them together in terms of a rail port supply chain transaction. And we'd hope to take that to the market, probably not early in the new year, but probably towards the end of the next financial year.
Got you. What I'm also realizing, there's a lot of highlighted collaborative efforts that have certainly come through, as you mentioned, bringing in the private sector to participate and collaborate really in terms of the growth that we need. I'm also intrigued just in terms of that partnership and how those conversations typically go about to make sure that you attract the necessary and appropriate partner to make sure that you're globally competitive, but still locally relevant to the local environment. You've mentioned a few highlights of international interactions, but also local partners who've really been very innovative with the solutions that they bring to market.
So, I mean, the way we design each of the transactions will try and draw out the kind of partner that we seek to encourage to be part of the collaboration. We would always want to partner with domestic partners. We would like to bring in Black-owned firms into those collaborations. So we've tried to design the partnerships in that way. It's not always possible. So, for example, around DCT, the focus is very much to get an international terminal operator that brought best practice from a global perspective. But in many of the other transactions, there will be opportunities for greater local participation. Some companies, for example, in the bulk terminal space are already very articulate in that space. So they have enormous capability. So we would hope that they would respond to some of our RFPs. The one thing that I just wanted to add is that some of our collaboration at the level that I'm talking about is very structured. It's around an equity component, an investment component, and then an operational component. But we do have partnerships that we continue to drive out, largely under Solly Swallow's responsibility as CEO, which is around working directly with customers in our key supply chains as we speak. Those are slightly different because those are not structured from an equity perspective. Those are more like get together with the key customers, work as closely as you can, co-invest, and drive out volume as fast as you can with an arrangement to both participate in that. A slightly different approach. Yeah.
And I heard refreshing stories as well from the chair, Mr. Letsalo, that it's really, a matter of, some of the customers coming into your boardroom and saying, how can I help? And I think that heightened level of camaraderie is so critical, especially given the important role that Transnet does serve within the mining industry. I'd like to conclude this conversation, but with going back to where we started off a year ago, you shared on stage with the minister and many other peers as to what the strategic direction is of Transnet going forward. And now here we are 12 months later, and it seems as though there's a heightened level of anticipation that we're going to accelerate the pace. For the stakeholder who's listening in the room and part of the mining community and other key stakeholder groups, help us understand what this new strategy continues to unlock, how it will unlock value for your key stakeholders going forward.
the first principle of value is to drive out volume to benefit the economy and to do that in a sustainable way. So we can't go back to government and say we need more money. The focus is to say we will.
Would that be an option though, if you needed to?
Look, I think in the interim, we have a period of time where it takes about 2 years to deliver some of these big PSPs. We are very clear that we're going to need help from government. So we are concerned about the state of the network, the rail network particularly. And so government is very, it wants the third-party access to work. It's very clear that from an infrastructure manager perspective, we will need investment on the existing rail network. If you want to open up additional slots for others, you can't do that if the network is falling apart and highly vandalized. We will need help to invest. And so we've been clear about that. I'm not sure we've reached agreement on that, but we've been very clear with them that this is a big challenge that we are struggling with. But then if I come back to your original question, which was, how do we see this going forward? What we do need to understand as the Transnet community is that the Transnet of the past is being adjusted and redesigned. First part of that adjustment is that the infrastructure pieces of the business are being separated out and will probably at some later point leave Trans. So the TNPA is the first one. It's been corporatized. It has its own board. So it's got a certain degree of independence about how it manages its infrastructure business and how it allocates license or terminals that Transnet no longer has the control to influence. That will also begin to happen around the rail side. So the infrastructure manager has been set up. It's still in the process of formulating a full management, but ultimately it will get a board. Ultimately, it will probably exit Transnet. That's probably still a longer-term solution. But the level of independence that it will be given is very much about it will allocate slots on a fair, transparent basis. TFR will have no justification to come back and say, but those are my slots, no one else can have them. So what we're seeing is a change in terms of the policy dimension.
Competitive environment.
A very much more competitive environment, particularly for us as an operating company. So the level of competition will probably be around, will be about freight rail operations and port operations. And that's going to be challenging for the business going forward.
Gotcha. Any expectations as to what we can hold you accountable to next year this time? There's a lot of moving parts. It's a lot of pressure, but you know that we're doing this as a team. But what can we look forward to that could potentially shift next year?
I think getting part of the policy finalized and in place, funding around supporting the rail infrastructure network, and then driving out these 5 key transactions. If we could get that done in the next financial year, I think I would be very, very relieved. And I think Transnet would be on a very sustainable footing for the future.
Definitely. Dr. Shaw, such a pleasure. We're well aware that it's a collaborative effort, many partners on board. And fundamentally what we're here to do is collaborate, seek opportunities, and thoroughly grow, given the strategy and the strategic direction of Transnet. Thank you again for your time and all the best.
Thank you, Gugu. Thanks for being on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's where we leave today's conversation, of course, with Dr. Andrew Shaw, who's Chief of Strategy and Planning at Transnet Group, helping us understand just how exactly it is that we're moving from seeing a plan on paper in terms of strategy, thoroughly being rolled out on the ground into tangible outcomes that do lead to a better operating environment of the business.